What is up, Pitcher List family? Welcome to another episode of Hacks and Jacks. I'm your host, Brett Ford, as always, joined by senior analyst Scott Chu. We're here talking hitters on Pitcher List, going over Scott's top 300 hitters list, talking up basically figuring out how we're drafting or how we're prepping for our drafts this March. It's deep into the thick of draft season. Scott, how are things up your way?
Not bad. I've got my first slow drafts of the year starting, really getting into the mix, really putting my own rankings to the test. Although, frankly, the leagues that have started for me already don't use the kinds of settings that I write my ranks for. But that's the way she goes. It's fun to be thinking about players in more than just a hypothetical context.
Yeah, I just finished my first draft and hold. Probably my only draft and hold, really. And like you say, these formats are completely different. Just so, as you go through Scott's ranks, just be aware that not everything is black and white as far as, the way Scott's writing it and the way that it should be applied.
Yeah, and as we talk about all the time, we'll talk about more later during this podcast. There is no vacuum. The rankings exist in a vacuum because I don't know what your team is, right? But the moment you start making picks, it's the moment the vacuum goes away. And especially as we talk about the back end of the rankings, when you're looking in the 200s and beyond, right? Like the vacuum died forever ago. Now it's very much about what do you need? What is your team makeup? What is it that you want from a player? You're looking for a guy who, if X, Y, and Z happens, he could break out and be an everyday starter. Or are you looking for a guy who I know for a fact he's going to play? And there will be times I just need him. Like in a draft and hold, there's a lot of times when you're like, just in case my first two shortstops go down, I need a third guy who's going to play. Versus, I just want the upside to see if something happens here. And it doesn't matter if it doesn't, right? How much are you counting on these guys? Early in the draft, this isn't really something you have to worry about as much, but the later you go, the more you have to try to figure out how to balance between floor and ceiling, and how willing are you to take someone who might do nothing versus how willing are you to take someone whose ceiling is still really low.
Absolutely. And while you're going through those late rounds in the draft, one of the things that can help you through all of your drafts this season is the Pitcher List Live Draft Assistant. This year, our Live Draft Assistant is fully updated and ready. We've completely overhauled it for your drafts. Think of it as having a personal scout, an analyst, a master strategist sitting right next to you as you draft. A lot of new features this year. It's a huge improvement, in my opinion, after playing with it for a couple of drafts, including the draft and hold I previously referenced. It's got fully integrated PLV 2.0 projections, more streamlined system for entering your picks, and new player tagging where you can designate players as sleepers, targets, do not draft guys. It's a lot of fun to use. It's a great prep tool. I found that I enjoy kind of preparing for my drafts by using it, and then obviously going through and using the live tool as you draft. But the cheat sheet tab in the Draft Assistant has everything you need, including all of our Keystone rankings, Nick's list, Scott's list, Rick Graham's closer list. Everything's built in there, and it's an awesome tool to draft with. Make sure you can dominate your draft with our live draft assistant using promo code PODCASTLDA15. The draft assistant is available with PL Pro subscriptions. If you want to support Pitcher List, the highest level lifetime subs are still open for a limited time.
And there's, I think something really interesting to just briefly touch on there is this comes up a lot in the PL Discord, like the PL Pros. They ask about this a lot. And mainly it's about this tension between rankings and projections, right? Now, rankings are informed by projections. I don't think there's very many people at all who do rankings without looking at projections at all. Maybe Nick, because he's weird. But everyone else, especially doing hitter rankings, you always look at projections because you want a sort of baseline to be like, okay, one, where's the market going to value these players? Number two, what do the projections see that maybe I don't? Right? What do the projections think about, Geraldo Perdomo's one-off season? Do the projections buy it or not? Right? Are projections always right? No. And actually, the whole point of ranking is sort of going against the projection. Like if all I wanted to do was have projections, my rankings would just be projections. But my rankings aren't just projections. They're often saying like, okay, how do you know? Yeah, I get it. This guy is projected to be the 15th best first baseman, but I've got him the 9th best first baseman because I think the projections are underrating. I say this about Josh Naylor. I think the projections are severely underrating his stolen base ability, right? I think it's real. So I'm going to go above and beyond what the projections do. Also with projections, you're not getting like they are trying to consider multiple possible universes, right? They're trying to put them all together. So especially when you get volatile players like Ellie De La Cruz and O'Neal Cruz, the projections struggle because they just give you this like one sort of in the middle outcome. But if you're someone who's like, I don't buy O'Neal Cruz at all, I think contact problems are just going to be too much, then you move him way down below his projection, or you go the other way and you say, I think he's going to overcome this. I've seen him with the good walk rates. I think he can balance it out. You go way above. The projections are trying to do both at the same time, so they end up in the middle. That's the difference, right? So when you're using that live draft assistant, what's great is that you can look at rankings. You can say, okay, Nick really likes the upside of this guy, even though the projections are cool on him, right? Why does Nick do that? Do I believe that narrative or do I believe the projection narrative? Which one do I want to go with? Having both is extremely valuable. Even if you don't use ours, right? Any projection plus a ranking will always be better than just one or the other.
Yeah, and using those kind of in concert, like you said, is crucial, in my opinion. It's certainly helped me, even just as the host of this podcast, just chopping it up with you on a weekly basis and kind of learning. Okay, not just taking the rankings verbatim, but actually looking at them in context versus projections versus other sources has been super helpful for me. And I think that it's helped me grow as a fantasy baseball manager. So, one of the things I'm looking forward to, I love draft season and really looking forward to jumping in on the LDA this year. Let's talk about some news and notes here. We've got a lot of stuff going as the first couple weeks of spring training is well underway. There's a handful of transactions that probably aren't relevant for fantasy, but we're going to mention them anyway. Scott, I'm just going to run through all of these, and if you hear something that piques your interest from a fantasy standpoint, maybe you don't, but stop me at any point. Rhys Hoskins signs with the Guardians.
Rhys Hoskins with the Guardians is extremely frustrating. The reason it's extremely frustrating is because yet again, the Guardians have decided Kyle Manzardo is not enough. That's what they've done. Kyle Manzardo had the ability, like he very well could have been the everyday guy, or at least like the clear, 140-ish games guy. And now by adding in this additional first baseman and putting him down to the DH thing, I think it's going to be really hard for him to get back to the 142 games we saw last season, right? I think some projections are still at 135. It might be closer to 120, right? I mean, this is another thing to do with projections where, okay, the projection says he's going to be $8, but how much do they think he's going to play, right? Kyle Manzardo is going to have a really hard time getting to 500 plate appearances thanks to Rhys Hoskins if Rhys Hoskins stays even mildly healthy, because guess what? They're going to platoon him now. They've got the ability to say, okay, Manzardo, go down, like sit against lefties. And I just wish they'd give this dude a chance, because there's not like Rhys Hoskins is a fine player. I understand why they did this. Manzardo is, he's got weaknesses, but every weakness he has, Rhys Hoskins basically has, right? In terms of like, as an everyday guy, as a weapon, it's not as though Rhys Hoskins is like some guy who throughout his career just mashes lefties. That's also not him, right? Because he's not even like a supernatural platoon partner. Rhys Hoskins hits, like 210 or something against lefties sometimes. I think last year was like 230. He's not like this, oh, I'm going to come up here, I'm really going to succeed against lefties. Now, he's like better than Manzardo, but he's not a world breaker here. I just don't get it. Why don't they like Kyle Manzardo? The guy's going to be going into his age 25 season. And at this point, it's getting this little bit of feel, sort of like we had with Andrew Vaughn, where the organization's never just going to let this dude be the dude, right? It's just not going to happen. I think this, to me, more than anything says, yeah, we'll take almost 33-year-old Rhys Hoskins because we just don't think Kyle Manzardo is enough.
Well, for what it's worth, Roster Resource has them both projected in the starting lineup. Manzardo at DH, Reese Hoskins at first base. So they can coexist, not necessarily like a strict platoon. But I mean, throw in guys like David Fry and Angel Martinez on the bench, both Fry, right-handed bat, Martinez switch, and you're looking at, like you said, Manzardo losing those at-bats against left-handed pitching.
Yeah, and the young guys they have that might start coming up, like one of their top prospects, he'll be starting in WA with Ralphie Velasquez. They already had CJ Kafis, who they had appear in the playoffs for them last year. He's going to be fighting for time. He's also left-handed, which is, going to make it a little tough. So is Ralphie Velasquez. But I mean, it clogs the roster more than anything else. It clogs the roster. And I get it. This wasn't a super strong roster to begin with. Like, they've got George Valera potentially batting second. That's terrifying. Right. But, and yes, I guess they needed another right-handed bat, but I don't like it. I know he's just a non-roster invitee at the moment, but it really hurts Manzardo's projection, if only for playing time. Because now they have another option at first base, a real one. So when there's a lefty, it's easy for them to say, all right, why don't you go down and let's bring up one of the guys off the bench.
We'll keep talking more transactions. It's basically all these transactions are veteran guys signing with teams and creating log jams. Next up, we've got Michael Conforto signing a minor league deal with the Cubs. Mitch Garver heads back to the Mariners. Elias Diaz signs with the Royals. Infielder Tyro Estrada signs with the Orioles for infield depth. Alex Verdugo signs with the Padres. And Randall Grichuk signs with the Yankees. Any of those other signings mean anything to you from a fantasy standpoint?
Tyro Estrada coming in almost feels like maybe the Orioles don't love the concept of Jeremiah Jackson and Blaze Alexander playing second base in the event that Holiday isn't ready in time. So that's mildly interesting. He's either going to make the roster and be in the lineup because they think he'll be better than Blaze Alexander or Jeremiah Jackson, or he doesn't make the team at all. Right. I think the only other guy there that really makes the team in any kind of meaningful way is Michael Conforto with the Cubs as a bench bat. Just being a lefty off the bench. They didn't have a lefty on their bench. They don't have a ton of lefties on this team in general, just Bush, Armstrong, and Moises Ballesteros. So now they get Michael Conforto to be in the outfield and be left-handed. So he'll play, but really it only matters in only leagues as a guy who might get a couple at-bats. If there's, when there's all 7 games all against righties, Conforto will probably play 2 or 3 times.
Jumping back to Estrada to Baltimore, is there any concern that the Orioles might turn over some of Kobe Mayo's at-bats to Estrada? Mayo projected to be the third baseman while Westberg recovers from his injury.
I mean, it's possible. I don't know that Estrada's ever really played there much. And there's a lot more upside in Kobe Mayo. You have a lot more incentive to give Kobe Mayo every day at bats to see what you have in this kid. Can he hit the off-speed stuff and do damage and just be someone who can be the part of the future of your team? Tyro Estrada is not part of the future of your team, right? And Blaze Alexander is, even if he's part of the future of your team, it's as a bench utility bat, right? Ditto Jeremiah Jackson. Yeah, he had a little bit of a hot streak last season, but again, he's not a guy that you're like, oh yeah, we're planning on this being an everyday starter for us, right? He's got some major plate discipline issues. I think what you saw is about as good as it could possibly get for Jeremiah Jackson last season. Yeah, I mean, he's had a great year overall in 2025, both in AAA and in the majors. I'm not sure we see him kind of repeat that sort of success again, but it was a great run. I think the strikeouts will get a little bit worse. Even, maybe he brings back what we saw last year in the minors was just this huge improvement in strikeouts. I don't know if that's coming back. Estrada also is a guy. I mean, he's just a guy. So Kobe Mayo is one of those guys that you're like, this could be a corner infielder for us for the long term. He's got the kind of upside to be a major part of this team going forward. So I think he gets to play. I think the real question is who's going to be the utility man for us in the middle infield? Blaze Alexander, Jeremiah Jackson, and now Tyro Estrada in the mix.
I think the one other signing that at least looked on the surface as it could indicate or it could have some repercussions is Grichuk to the Yankees. I think if anything, that's a sign that Jason Dominguez is not making this major league roster on opening day.
Oh, you're right. I mean, that's another tough because they needed another like outfielder, kind of like they need another hole in their head, right? Like in theory, they've got Jeremiah Jackson they've got Jason Dominguez, and that was fine, right? That was plenty. They have Spencer Jones down there. He's a guy that could do something. Hey, maybe you kick the tires on Marco Luciano again. He's a guy that can play in the outfield. You've got all these guys who are not worse than Randall Grichuk, right? Why? What was like, what, you don't think you have enough veteran experience on this team? You need another 34-year-old? Right? Like you've already got Paul Goldschmidt on the bench, right? You've already got 36-year-old Giancarlo Stanton, almost 34-year-old Aaron Judge, 31-year-old Ryan McMahon. You didn't need veteran leadership on this squad. The whole bench is over 30. You know, like I don't understand what's value. And like, again, maybe you say like, oh, we need another right-handed bat with power. Yeah, except you've got like the two biggest right-handed power bats in baseball with Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton. So what are we doing here, folks? What was the point of this? Right? Like, and it's not like you needed a guy to play the position defensively, because one, he doesn't do it super well at this point in his career. And you already had Ahmed Rosario on the bench who can do that, right? And Jason Dominguez can do that. Spencer Jones could do. You had so many options and you chose this one. I don't get it. He's not someone you really want to take in any league whatsoever, because you don't even know if he's actually going to make this team. He's a non-roster invitee. And if he does, it's just like, what was the point? You have plenty of other guys. Like maybe your argument is, oh, well, Dominguez and Jones, they really need everyday playing time down in AAA. And it's like these, especially Dominguez, he's been down there. There's not something for him to learn there. He needs to be in the bigs.
Yeah, that was the one that put up a red flag for me that I was disappointed by. But I mean, leave it to Randall Grichuk to disappoint us, even at this point of his career. Injury news across spring training. A lot of bumps and bruises, a lot of load management, a lot of rest for guys, a lot of noise. Really the only mildly concerning injury that I saw on the news update Discord channel was Brenton Doyle with a wrist sprain. He's going to miss at least a little bit of time in spring training. And wrist, man, we talked about hamate bones not being a big deal, but the actual wrist, like muscle sprain, they kind of concern me as far as, generating power and swinging a baseball bat.
Yeah, at least it's a sprain, right? So sprains can get better just with rest. Doyle had a pretty decent second half last year, although he was up and down then. He'll probably be up and down again. I think you can count on some steals. I think the batting average will be better. I think that, the ratios overall will be bad, but the batting average should be somewhat useful just because he'll get those games in Coors. I think the stolen bases can go back up and be closer to like 25. He only had 18 last season. He ran with much more frequency the first two seasons. So I think that can come back, but yeah, I don't, it's not as though he hit the ball that much worse, right? The barrel rate was actually higher. The hard hit rate was higher in 2025 than it was in 2024, despite the worst results. The average exit velocity was up like 0.8 of a mile per hour, which again, doesn't sound like much, but that's a whole bunch for him. It was harder than he'd ever really been hitting it. So I think maybe it was just like a little bit of bad luck on like line drives versus ground balls. And I do think he can turn it around. But what we're going to see for now is rest. Maybe he misses the first week. We're starting to get to the point where if a guy is hurt for like 2 or 3 weeks, they're going to say, oh, he might miss opening day. Please don't overreact to the concept of missing opening day. Opening day is just a day, right? It's just a random target, right? I mean, it's not random in the sense that it is when we start doing this, but like guys miss games, right? If you if you had a guy missing, let's say 15 to 20 games in a season, which is pretty normal, right? Brenton Doyle can still get to like 550, almost 600 plate appearances playing 140 games. If you project the guy to play 140 games, when he misses like those 20 games, just because he misses the first couple games doesn't all of a sudden say, oh, I should probably move that projection down, right? It's like, no, you thought he'd get a little bumps and bruises throughout the season. This is just the first one, right? There's no real need to change. So when we start talking about missing beyond the first 2 weeks of the season, then you really want to start getting maybe worried that, okay, I really am going to have to think about this. What is that going to mean? But for now, if they just say, oh, guy might not make it opening day, if you miss the first week of action, who cares? Right? Like the rest of your roster is going to be ready to go. You can cover a guy for a week. You're probably going to have to do it at some point in the regular season anyway. Doing it the first week is just almost easier.
Well, that gets us through all of our transactions and injury news. When we come back after this break, we'll jump into the rest of Scott's top 300 hitters list after this. Welcome back to Hacks and Jacks. I'm your host, Brett Ford, here with Scott Chu. We're talking hitters on Pitcher List. We're diving into Scott's top 300 hitters list. We're down to tier 18. We covered tiers 1 through 8, 9. The first 100 hitters in our episode 137, 2 episodes ago. Last episode, we took the next 100 hitters or so. We've gotten through 17 tiers. We've got 4 more to go, but we've got 100 players to talk about, Scott. Let's jump right into tier 18. And leading us off at 198 overall is Harrison Bader, followed by Mike Yastrzemski, Zach McKinstry, Ryan Jeffers, Romy Gonzalez, Carlos Narvaez, Andres Jimenez, Marcelo Mayer, Evan Carter, Dominic Canzone, Jordan Walker, Victor Robles, Jorge Soler, Isaac Collins, and Cam Smith. In this tier, it feels like a lot of hope casting, man. A lot of guys whose names have been hot topics, who we've wanted to be good, and they just haven't been or aren't. I'm thinking of guys like Evan Carter, Jordan Walker, Tyler O'Neill. These are some of the names that have been at least hot topics during draft season in years past. This year, they're down in the 200s. Talk to me about some of these guys down in this tier.
Yeah, and this tier is a mix of guys who maybe aren't super high ceiling, but when they play, let's use the guy at the top, Harrison Bader, for instance. He's got back-to-back 140-game seasons, and he should be able to get like 15 home runs, 15 steals with, not great ratios. I think, last season they looked great, but that's just because he had a BABIP spike. He's like a little less than 250 hitter over his career, and his OBP will be around 300. Again, not great. County stats won't be great because it'll be at the bottom of the San Francisco Giants lineup, but Harrison Bader, when he plays, a little bit of power, a little bit of speed, and, obviously excellent defensively. So when he's healthy, he plays. Now, he had a lot of injuries up until the last 2 seasons, and he's played mostly, but he's like a safer pick. He's like, okay, I need an outfielder that's going to play, do a little bit of power, a little bit of speed. Like, he'll be there, right? So, but the ceiling isn't much higher than 15-15, right? Maybe it's like 17-15, that's it. And maybe the ratios will be like less bad. That's it. Or like a Zach McKinstry, who had like a great first half and then a really bad second half, but 10 something home runs, 15 steals, better ratios, can play all over the field. It's safe, right? He's going to play. So like there's that kind of player. Yeah. And then there's the Evan Carters who, like, if he stays healthy, if he's, doing stuff, he could steal like 25 to 30 bases, Evan Carter, with a little bit of pop, right? Double digit pop, maybe a decent batting average, but like injuries have kept him out constantly since being called up. Or Jordan Walker, who at one time was a top 5 prospect in baseball. It's easy to forget that, but Jordan Walker, especially when he first came up, we were taking him as a starting third baseman in fantasy drafts, right? He just never has been able to get the ball off the ground. He has plus power. His average exit velocity last year was 92.3 miles an hour. Smokes the ball. Elite bat speed, 99th percentile bat speed. But he hits everything on the ground. No matter how hard you hit it, if the ball stays knee high, you're just not going to go that far with it. It's either an out or a single. Doesn't really matter how hard you hit it. So he's the kind of guy who, like, yeah, cue the hype train, which is what I say in the article. He went to Driveline over the winter. Maybe that does something, but he's the kind of guy where you take him because there's ceiling there, even though the floor is abysmal, far worse than like a Bader. But the ceiling is a lot better because if he somehow found a way to get that ball in the air, this is a guy who could hit 25, 30 home runs. He's got that kind of power. It's just we haven't seen him do anything close to that. Or, Cam Smith, who will he or won't he be a starter for this team? I mean, I didn't think he'd be the starter coming out of spring training last year, and he was. Now I think he is going to be the starter, and maybe he won't be. But Cam Smith was a highly rated prospect, right? He was a top 50 prospect. There was a reason we were excited about Cam Smith last season. And there's an opening with Jesus Sanchez no longer on this team, right? I don't think any of these guys say, this guy has to be a starter for them, except for maybe Cam Smith. He's taking some reps in center field, so maybe that helps him get a little bit more playing time. But Cam Smith, a guy who has a high ceiling, but a very low floor, that floor being a platoon, a small side of a platoon with poor results like we saw last season. So when you're in this part of the draft, you really need to be thinking about what type of player is it that I need? Do I need someone to fill in plate appearances? Maybe because I'm in a draft and hold and that's what this roster is. Or am I shooting for the moon here? I've got some of these positions covered up pretty well. And so I'm going to grab Marcelo Mayer because even though he might get sent down and the strikeouts are just real bad and he doesn't show us much more than we did in those horrible 44 games that he had, where he hit everything on the ground. And when he wasn't hitting it on the ground, he was missing entirely. How do we, am I taking that lotto ticket or am I taking the safe, like Andres Jimenez is going to play, right? And steal some bases and do nothing else really at all. So yeah, what is it that you need? What is it that you're looking for? The more shallow the league, the more you should be disregarding names like Zach McKinstry entirely and just looking for those guys with the big upside.
One of the names that I kind of like in this tier, the more that I look into him, and maybe this is because I'm in like TGFBI mode where it's going to be a 15-team, 5 outfielder league, is Mike Yastrzemski. Just kind of looking at the Braves roster makeup, there's not a lot of competition for at-bats in that outfield. Yastrzemski is penciled in as the starter, and really the only guy behind him on the roster is like Brett Wisely. There's nobody really knocking on the door in the minors. I kind of think Yastrzemski could get to 600 plate appearances with the Braves.
The disrespect for your boy Jorge Mateo on that bench is just...
he's an infielder.
I mean, just for at-bats, right? Jerks and Profar could move off DH, play outfield, and whatever. But no, Yastrzemski, the problem with Yastrzemski is sort of as you're alluding to, the ceiling isn't great, right? We saw 4 consecutive seasons of basically exactly what Mike Yastrzemski is now. That's a low batting average, okay OBP guy who can hit 15 to 18 home runs, very specifically in that range, just to be clear, very specifically going into his age 35 season. He's certainly not going to be any better than that. I think that, he'll hit probably 230 or less. His OBP will probably be like 320 and he'll hit like 16 home runs. That's fine. That's totally fine. But again, in a 12-team league, I am uninterested entirely, right? Just because there's no ceiling there. It's just a platoon bat. I'm certainly not interested. What I should say, I'm not interested on draft day. In season, I might need to fill in, and it's 7 games for Atlanta versus all right-handed pitching. All right, there's a fill in, right? Yeah, maybe Yaz does a little something for a week, but he's not someone in a 12-team league, even one with a big bench, that I'm looking for. Although, hey, Yaz does have 3 home runs in his first 4 games in spring training, which means absolutely nothing from a 35-year-old man. But 35 and a half, actually, he'll turn 36 during the season. But he did that. It's true. So yeah, again, deep league though, there's plenty there. There's plenty there to be a 5th outfielder, especially if, you kind of waited a while and had to fill in all your other positions and find yourself missing that 4th outfielder. Yaz should be there for quite a while.
Anything else in this tier you want to touch on before we move on?
No. There's another old guy with power would be Jorge Soler, who I think is going to play. And he'll have like a decent OBP, but again, it's like an old man lotto ticket. Like the grand prize is $17 kind of thing.
And it's, well beyond replacement level, right? We talk about replacement level a lot on this podcast. You'll hear us talk about it a lot throughout the season. Jorge Soler in a 12-team league is beyond the replacement level.
Oh, yeah, way beyond. Actually, there is one more guy too, because you're going to look at the stats and you're going to say Isaac Collins had a really nice season for the Brewers last year. You're going to say, look at that, 122 WRC plus, stole 16 bases. Now he's going to a Royals team where he should be able to win at least most of a starting job. But it's worth noting that what Collins actually did was have a 3-month hot streak, right? June, July, August, he was real good. But before that and after that, he was real bad. And by the end of the season, he was platooned. He was only playing against lefties, right? So yes, with a whole season, he could be like 10 home runs, 15 steals, and a decent OBP. But don't fall for the full season line. This was 3 hot months. 3 hot months for a 27-year-old rookie. All right. So don't look at that and be like, oh man, this is a sleeper in the back of the draft. It's not. It's not. There's a reason that he's way down here in the ranks, and it's because I'm not a huge believer in that hot streak. I think it was just a hot streak, which again, he may be a streamer at some point in the season, especially if he's getting everyday playing time, but he's not someone I'm looking for on draft day. The ceiling is just not there. And neither is the floor, because he may just be like the small side of a platoon.
Fair enough. Let's move on to tier 19. Tier 19 starts at number 213 overall. Your Detroit Tigers catcher, Dylan Dingler, Edgar Caro, Tyler Stevenson, Logan O'Hoppe, Brett Batty, Connor Norby, Andrew Benintendi, Bryce Eldridge, Jake Cronenworth, Moises Ballesteros, Nick Gonzalez, Bo Naylor, Victor Scott, Jonathan India, Trevor Larnach, Lane Thomas, Owen Casey, Wenzel Perez, Brian Hayes, Ryan McMahon, Parker Meadows, Vaughn Grissom, Tyler O'Neill, Carson Kelly, Carter Jensen, and Victor Caratini. 26 names in this tier, Scott. A lot of them to talk about. Any of them worth spending time on here?
Yeah, let's skip the catchers, right? So these guys are only interesting in 2-catcher leagues where you kind of feel like having a third. Right now, if you're going to look for one of these, maybe I rank Dingler the highest because he's like the safest. I think the batting average for him comes way down because he's not going to hit line drives like he did last season. It's a fluky line drive rate. Line drive rate is one of the flukiest stats out there, especially if a guy's all of a sudden doing it way better than he did before. It is extreme. It's extremely uncommon to say this guy made a skill change and now he hits way more line drives, right? A guy hitting more than 25% line drives is probably a slap hitter, right? It's Luis Arias that'll do that. And Freddie Freeman always showed a really high line drive rate. But if a guy didn't have a high line drive rate in the minor leagues, for example, and all of a sudden he's just pelting them all over the place in the majors, that's just good batted ball luck. Because the difference between a ground ball and a fly ball and a line drive, when you talk about round ball on round bat, is really, really small. And line drive rates do 2 things. Number one, they're really fluky. Especially from year to year, they take forever to stabilize, way longer than ground balls and flies balls, like 3 to 4 times as long for line drive rate to stabilize because it's just really noisy because of how close it is to ground balls and fly balls. Whereas there's a difference between ground balls and fly balls, like it's quite a bit more room on the bat to get to one or the other. So it's really fluky and it inflates your X stats bad, right? Because you look at next stat and say, oh yeah, this means he can do that, right? His X average and X slug look pretty good. You think he can do that? Well, if it was just because they got lucky on line drives, they're probably not going to repeat that. Like, what is the source for the high X WOBA, right? If a dude's got a 28.2% line drive rate, that's probably the source, not some kind of like underlying great power. It's he hit a bunch of balls at launch angles that tend to go for hits, right? That's all that is. So be a little careful with that. I think Edgar Cuero is interesting. Another guy that's going to drive line to work on the launch angle and the power. He doesn't strike out much. He's more of a hit tool guy, but I think he could be a catcher that doesn't kill your batting average, right? So that's something interesting if you're looking for that third catcher. I think Brett Batty is interesting. We said this last year too, and it kind of panned out, sort of. He's going to be a guy who plays, right? We don't know exactly how much Batty will play. Right now, he's kind of looking like the DH, but I think between, maybe some fill-ins for Marcus Semien at second, maybe some fill-ins for Bo Bichette at third, maybe they just kind of move guys around a little bit. I think he can play. He should be able to hold off like Mark Vientos and stuff like that. So he's got some pop. He, really kind of was better in the second half last season where he was a fairly serviceable player, even though he wasn't really playing against lefties. So Batty's a guy. I mean, he did hit 18 home runs last year on 130 games. He might have a hard time getting to that number of games, but he could get back to that number of home runs while hitting 250. The ratios aren't going to be great, but there's real power here. And for him, it's all about that ground ball rate. It's been over 50% every year of his career. When the ground ball rate gets below 50%, closer to like 45 to 40%, that's when we see the guy we really like. As it starts creeping between like 45% to 50% and up, that's when we see the guy who just hits into too many outs, right? Because the strikeout rate is fine, but it's the ground balls that just kill him. So if he gets the ball in the air, there's a potential breakout guy here, although it'll be hard for him to carve out too much more playing time unless we see injuries from, old man Marcus Semien or guy who tends to get hurt every year, Jorge Polanco or something like that.
One of the guys that's in this tier that I was super high on last year, but I'm kind of backpedaling from that because I'm scared to death of the strikeout rate, is San Francisco Giants, listed as a DH, probably going to end up being a first baseman, Bryce Eldridge. Tremendous power here. Range of outcomes could be anywhere from, I won't say like a poor man's Nick Kurtz all the way to like a Chris Carter. Where do you think we fall on that spectrum, Scott?
Wow, look, name dropping the Chris Carters. The walk rate was really, really high as he came in, way higher than it probably should have been. He looked he did not have the eye-popping numbers in AAA that we had hoped, right? He kind of stumbled a little bit there. And then, of course, in the major leagues last year, he stumbled a bit. Eldridge is huge. He's 6'7", a huge lefty with big power, probably more power than anybody in the minor leagues, right? Like him and Connor Griffin, which is a nice comp to have, right? I'm as good at Connor Griffin at something, right? Dude's already got 3 home runs. He's absolutely unreal. We'll talk about him more in a future episode when we talk about young guys who might be able to break camp. Eldridge, the strikeout rate is scary. We loved the hard hit rate in his small sample last year. Even in the minors, his average exit velocity was over 95 miles an hour in both AAA and in the majors last year. So you put those combined, it's like 185 batted ball events and then average exit velocity above 95 miles an hour. Dude smokes the ball, right? He just wasn't quite getting it to where we needed it to go. A few too many ground balls in the majors, although, it was basically the biggest thing that we saw in the majors is like he didn't hit a single line drive. He hit like 2 line drives the whole time. Everything was ground ball, fly ball. I think that's just an adjustment thing. He's a great lottery ticket at the back end of a draft. If you're just like, who's available at the very end of the draft that could hit 30 home runs this year? Bryce Eldridge is one of those guys in a 12-team league. He should be there at the very end of the draft, and he has real 30 home run power, no doubt.
Another guy in this tier that I know you're familiar with as a Tigers fan, somebody who I love his game. I just wish he would put together a season. It's outfielder Parker Meadows. I feel like he's a 2020 guy waiting to happen. He just hasn't stayed on the field long enough to put it together.
And I really wish I still believed that. I actually had the great opportunity to be on Days of Roar. That's the podcast for the Detroit Free Press last week. So go and check that out. We do an in-depth dive of PLV stats a bit on just Tigers hitters. It was a lot of fun for me. Evan Petzold's in the, just that pot. It's the second year I've been able to be on it and just absolutely love it. So if you're a Tigers fan, definitely check it out. Or if you just want to hear my take on these Tigers hitters, my problem with Parker Meadows is I just don't think the plate discipline is there. I think the OBP continues to get worse every season. He really struggles with that. Is there some power? Not as the home run rate, like the number of home runs he has makes you think he hits the ball a lot harder than he does. He doesn't. His hard hit rate is extremely low. Uh, when he does hit the home runs, it's because he pulls the ball a lot and he can just tuck it over the fence. But I can't fall in love with it anymore. I think Parker Meadows at this point should be seen as a strong defender who can play in a platoon, who will generally hit ninth when he plays. The big competition he's going to have is Max Clark. Max Clark is going to probably start the year in AAA, and he'll be pushing for playing time. And one of the easier guys to go through is Parker Meadows. And I think that is what we'll see. Now, again, there is upside here. Like, I'm not just going to say he doesn't have power and speed, and he may have games, maybe at the start of the season, if he has a good spring, he does lead off to start, and that makes him interesting, right? But the role he plays, like this team already has lefties. They don't need like an extra lefty on the bench. They got a bunch of them on the roster already with McKinstry and Keith and Green and Carpenter. So they're probably not going to have Jahmai Jones go down. They need that right-handed bat off the bench, especially because two of their three best hitters are weak against left-handed pitching in Green and Carpenter. And Veerling has versatility on the infield and the outfield. So Parker Meadows becomes the guy that could go down if Max Clark comes up. If you decide to draft Parker Meadows, it's because he's having a good spring and you think he could start the year leading off because this team is dying for a leadoff hitter and they don't really have one.
And the last name I'll bring up, I know you told us to kind of not worry about catchers throughout this tier, but one of the more interesting ones, and Nate actually noted this in his little blurb at the bottom here, but Royals catcher Carter Jensen is a trendy name as far as catchers go. Talk to me about Jensen and what his ceiling might look like this year.
I do think he's going to get plenty of time because I think at some point you start letting Sal be a DH, right? If you want his knees to make it any longer than they already have, you got to give them some days. Jensen has an amazing minor league track record. He does. And he could be like a good OBP guy with like 15 home runs, but also I'm not sure how. I mean, this is definitely like this is like a sleeper if you're looking for like a back end second catcher kind of skill set, right? So his small sample in the majors last year was phenomenal. He slugged 550 with a 391 OBP. The plate discipline was great. I think he'll continue to walk, but I think that strikeout rate, that 17.4% strikeout rate is a little suspect. Even though he was kind of steady with it in that very small sample, I think that's going to end up kind of jumping up. I think the walk rate is going to come down just a little bit, just closer to 10%. And I think that he's going to be a guy, I don't think he's going to have a 58.3% hard hit rate, although he did do that in the minor leagues for a bit. Granted, I just can't get super excited because I don't think he'll play as much as he did at the end of year last year. And I don't think this outburst is going to just keep coming. But again, as a sleeper second catcher guy, catcher who maybe gets to play in 100 games, he could sneak into double-digit home runs with decent ratios, especially for a catcher.
Is there anybody else you want to talk about in this tier before we move on?
Oh, it's such a large tier. I think there's a rabbit here. Victor Scott II. If you need stolen bases and don't care about anything else, Victor Scott II will probably steal 30. He's going to play a ton because the Cardinals are no good and he's a pretty good defender. And he's going to bat ninth and he's going to steal because if that team wants to score runs, they need someone to steal bases because they're not going to hit super great. So we've had a couple in the ranks up till now, but this is one of those big highlights where you're like, look, it's a one category guy, exactly one. And there are times you might need that, right? Like technically Chandler Simpson is like the better version of this, but Man, if you told me by ADP, which would I rather have? I'd almost rather take Scott because it's like I'll just start him when I need the steals, right? When he's got good steals matchups based on the battery he's up against, I'll just plug him in then and not, not spend the resources to have a guy who's going to have to play for me every day.
I like that shout. We will take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about the final two tiers in Scott's top 300 hitters list. Sorry. Welcome back to Hacks and Jacks. I'm your host, Brett Ford, here with Scott Chu. We're talking hitters on Pitcher List, Scott's top 300 hitters list. We're down to tier 20, and tier 20 begins at number 239 with Tampa Bay Rays shortstop Carson Williams. Continues on with Aiden Miller, Max Clark, Josh Smith, Nolan Arenado, Ha-Seong Kim, Christian Campbell, Mauricio Dubon, Lourdes Gurriel Jr., Walker Jenkins, Travis Bazana, Sean Murphy, Luis Angel Acuna, Tristan Cassis, Sungmun Song, Lennon Sosa, Justin Crawford, Jake McCarthy, Gavin Lux, Denzel Clark, Nasim Nunez, Miguel Andujar, Rhys Hoskins, and Tyler Freeman. A lot of guys in this tier, a lot of prospects in this tier as well. Talk to me about tier 20, Scott. Take it any direction you want.
Yeah, first of all, if you're in a 12-team league, take all those prospects and bump them up a tier, right? I don't think a lot of these guys are going to be super productive right out the gate. I think Carson Williams is one that will play for the Rays, and he's got a lot of upside and like a real tough strikeout rate, and his zone contact rate in the minors and the majors is utterly horrifying. So there's a lot of risk there, but if you want a guy who could go 20-30, that's Carson Williams. Aiden Miller is someone who could steal 30 bags this season, like right out the gate, and be more interesting than the previously mentioned Victor Scott II. It's just less of a sure thing because Aiden Miller will probably need about 120-ish games to get to that number. I write in the article, he could do it as few as 100, but that's pretty aggressive, especially for a team that should be able to score runs. And he doesn't have a clear path to the majors with Trey Turner around. So there's that. Max Clark, if he can really kind of run with it in the minor leagues, he could find himself up, but I don't know if he's going to be an everyday player when he does, but still worth a look. So yeah, a couple of those guys are interesting. Walker Jenkins, if you're in an OBP league, worth a shot. He could walk a lot. And I'm kind of interested to see what happens with Luis Angel Acuna, just because this team is not good at helping players get rid of strikeouts or work on their contact. The White Sox just don't do that. But there's an opening to be a starter for the White Sox, and he's got a bunch of speed. There's not much power to speak of here. That's why we've got 3 major league home runs in 109 games. But the White Sox are probably just looking for sparks, looking for guys who can be interesting for them. And I think Luis Angel Acuna is more interesting than Andrew Benintendi. He's more interesting than Brooks Baldwin, and that could give him a chance to play, right? This team's just going to load up with, mid 20-something-year-olds, and I think they should just kind of see what happens. It'd be a better development move than they've done in the last decade. So why not give it a whirl? He could be someone who, if they give him a starting job, could be a bit interesting if you need speed. Same for Justin Crawford, who I think is going to play. I think he's going to be a starter for the Phillies. And again, he's like a stolen bases only kind of guy. It's still, I should say stolen bases batting average. So he could be too. He'll probably move up in my next ranks. The more it looks like he's definitely the starter, he'll move up. Someone that's interesting there. And Rhys Hoskins is going to move up a little from this tier, frustratingly, but I think he's going to play. So he gets to move up. And don't forget about Ha-Seong Kim if you need steals. He's not going to have enough time to get to like the 10 home runs or 20 stolen bases that I would have expected if he played all year, but he's not going to be gone that long. So if you have unlimited IL spots, he should be someone you might star at the back end of your draft, because when he's ready, he's going to be the everyday shortstop for Atlanta, and he'll be not bad, right? He'll be serviceable in deeper leagues. So he's someone you might want to star that might get forgotten about because projections are going to bury him because he's going to miss a bit of the beginning part of the season.
Trying to decide who I want to ask you about. Sorry.
There's not a
You
lot of
mentioned
interesting guys here.
what's that? Sorry.
No, there's just not a lot of interesting guys.
You started off by talking about Carson Williams, and one of the biggest knocks on Williams is that the Rays love Taylor Walls and will not stop playing Taylor Walls regardless of whether he carries a bat with him to the batter's box or not. What would it take for Carson Williams? What are you looking for out of Carson Williams in the early parts of the season? What would you call a successful first month of the year for him?
Yeah, so the reason for that is because Taylor Walls is really, really good defensively. That's why the Rays have always liked him. He hits for a really low average, but he puts he gets on base better than that. I guess he walks a lot. He doesn't have much power. He does have speed. What I'll be looking for in Carson Williams is contact. The guy whiffed a ton when he was up. He whiffed a ton when he was down. He's got to try to get somewhere close to an 80% zone contact rate. And if he can't start climbing that direction, it's just not, I don't see how he can be successful. He'll just be another one of those guys that it's like, yeah, he had a lot of power and speed and he never hit the ball enough to make it matter. That's the fear with Carson Williams. I think he will play, he won't play every single day, but he'll get the opportunity because his glove is definitely plus, and he could be the type of guy that completely overtakes Taylor Walls. But again, he's going to have to make some contact.
Another guy in this tier who I thought was interesting, at least, was Josh Smith from the Rangers, utility guy. Should get at bats. I have no idea where he'll play defensively. It could be everywhere. But he was a guy that kind of struck me as like a Geraldo Perdomo kind of candidate where he does a little bit of everything, but you're not sure how. And he was streaky, at parts of the last 2 seasons. Frankly, he's been extremely streaky. Talk to me about Josh Smith and whether or not you're interested down here in the 200s.
Well, he begs, borrows, and steals his way into 140 games each of the last 2 seasons. There's, again, the upside is what you saw, right? Barely double-digit home runs, barely double-digit stolen bases, counting stats worse than you'd like, but ratios that are fine, right? He can't slug 400. He can't, hit. He'll probably hit like 240, 250. He'll probably get on base like, a 330 clip or so. Again, I'd like to say I don't see how he gets to 140 games, but I said that last year and he did. It'll just be injuries and things like that. He can play all over the place. He's eligible, especially in Yahoo leagues, all over the place. But in every league, he should be eligible at outfield, short, third, and first. So, well, actually, no, I think he fell short of outfield just by a little. In Yahoo leagues, he'll be there. In outfield, in other leagues, he won't. But he'll always have the short first and third. So he's versatile. He's a fine deep league bench guy, right? I think the price is going to be down. And if you believe he's going to get plenty of playing time, I can't call him a sleeper because there's just no ceiling. And I think it's weird to call a guy a sleeper when you think he's going to be roughly as good as he was last year. And that dude was like just barely a top 200 hitter, but you're not paying top 200 prices. So that's okay. Right. I mean, he's not exciting, but he'll play. And that's the kind of guy who, again, at this stage of the draft, you may have a need for that. It's just like in a 12-team league, there's just really I have no interest because the upside's just not there. Even like a Jake McCarthy, he probably can't hit, right? He had many chances to be the guy for the D-backs and it didn't work. But hey, he goes to Colorado. Maybe there's a path to Jake McCarthy being a starter, even in a 3 outfield league. That's where he gets to lead off for the Rockies and he's stealing 40 bags and slapping the ball around when he's at home, right? It's not that hard to get there mentally. Do I think that's going to happen? No. That's why I ranked him 256th. But I see the path. I see how it could happen. What is the path for Josh Smith to be a starter in a 12-team league? That path is he is better than he's ever been before. That's it. It's not shows me a skill that he showed me for a little bit once before. Like Jake McCarthy's been that guy for half a season. He's been that guy for 60 games. Josh Smith has never been that guy. He's been I'm really glad I got him off the wire for a while, right? That's Josh Smith, and that's all he's going to be. So that's probably the difference there. But again, as if you're in AL only, if you're in draft and hold, you're in the reserve rounds of a 15-teamer, sure. He is a fine reserve who can fill in at a couple spots until you find something better.
Well, we'll move on from that safe volume feel and kind of go to the other end of the spectrum for a guy who might have some ceiling if he ends up getting on the field. And that's Cleveland second baseman Travis Bazzana. Highly rated prospect, better bat than anything Cleveland has at second base currently. Talk to me about Bazzana and whether or not we might see him at some point early in the season.
I love how you went on a limb there. Better bat than anything they have at second base currently, which is Brian Rocchio, right? Like Brian Rocchio is a fine major league player, but it's not because he can hit, right? He's all defense. So Bazzana, I thought they'd bring him up last year. This team, so what I write in the article is the Guardians should realize they need offensive firepower in the worst way. And they signed Rhys Hoskins, and this phrase doesn't change. This team still needs offensive firepower in the worst way. Bazzana could be that guy. Like he's certainly not at the same level of some of the prospects that are, up about 50 spots from here, right? Like this isn't Connor Griffin. This is a guy who could maybe be like a fine regular. You know what I mean? Like he has good numbers in the minor leagues. We saw him at AA and AAA last year. He doesn't have huge power, but he gets on base a ton. He could be someone who provides, especially in an OBP league, a little bit of plus. He's just smoked. I mean, he's smoked the ball so far this spring. He didn't do it so much in AAA last year, but it's only 6 batted ball events, but he's averaging 96 miles an hour on those balls. But, he doesn't have like a huge power ceiling. It's probably like 12 to 15 home runs, maybe like 10 steals, but he could also hit like 250 maybe, and that to say, offensive firepower and they need it. And this is it for the Guardians. 10 home runs is offensive firepower. They don't have that, right? They don't, and especially 10 home runs that doesn't hit like 200. Brian Rocchio played 143 games in 2024. He hit 8. All right. And then he hit 206 doing it. So, last season he had 5, but he hit 233. So I guess that's better. But yeah, Bazzana could be somewhat interesting as a second baseman. If something were to happen where I found out today he was the starter for the Guardians, he might break into the back of the top 200. That's the kind of upside I'm thinking about now. He'd probably be in like the first tier we talked about today, because I'd say, hey, there's a little bit here, 10, full season. That's 10, maybe even 15 home runs, maybe 10 stolen bases. That's a guy, right? And maybe there's more. Maybe he unlocks a little bit more power, something like that. But that's kind of the upside we're talking about with Bazzana. He could be like just inside the top 200 with a starting job. And then in season, if he looked good for a week or two, he could break into the top 50 the top 150.
And, you say that and somebody might not think that much of it, but top 200 for a second base eligible prospect is borderline startable with how weak the position is.
Yeah, it's so second base, just to briefly talk about some strategy there. It's just the absolute wash, right? After the first 2 or 3 tiers second baseman, you're just in the wash the whole time, right? Like second base is a position where if I didn't grab someone with eligibility early in the draft, I'm just not going to pressure myself. At no point in any draft, particularly in a 12-team league, should you be thinking, oh my God, I got to get a second baseman. Just get the last one, because the difference between the last one and like the 7th one just ain't that much, right? I'd get the last second baseman and I'd feel just fine about it. right? And I don't know who that is. Maybe that's like an Otto Lopez or a Bryson Stott because I need speed, Caleb Durbin. Like those are the kind of guys you can get, late as second baseman, and it's fine, right? Even Brendan Donovan, maybe, kick the tires on Matt McLean. Maybe he's a little better than he was last year, right? That's just inside top, your boy, Willie Castro, right? That can be the last second baseman. Do you feel great about it? No. But is Willie Castro that much worse than the other names I just said? Not really.
Do
right?
I feel great about it? Yes.
Yeah. And I'm happy for you, right? Like, but that's, he's not, or like a Chase Meadroth because, I want some batting average and steals and I don't really care about the rest. And he's going to lead off for the White Sox. Like, yeah, second base, keep waiting. And if you're in a deep league, my backup second baseman, I'm just going to keep waiting. That's my motto for second base, basically all offseason. Just keep waiting. It's okay. Keep waiting until you really feel like, all right, this is a good value. Like the stars kind of align. Okay, I'll take this second baseman. Don't pressure yourself. And if Bazana becomes available, it's like, yeah, sure. Why not? Right? Like Brett Batty. That's not terrible. I worry a little bit about the playing time, but hey, it's fine. Second base, it doesn't have cliffs like third base, right? Third base has a cliff. I want one of those first, 9 guys. Second base, it's like, meh. It just kind of slowly, like the quality just kind of trickles down. And you get to the end and you're like, it's still not that much less than what I was thinking about 4 rounds ago. So I'll just do it now.
Beautiful. We've got one more tier left to cover, Scott. We're already over an hour for the pod. We've got 38 guys in this tier. I'm not going to read them. It starts at number 263. Jordan Lawler goes all the way down to number 300. Nick Castellanos, now a San Diego Padre. Pick a handful of these guys that you think are worth talking about here in the final tier of your top 300 hitters list.
Yeah, let's do some quick hits. So I already talked about a little bit earlier, Kobe Mayo in this tier. I think, he's going to get a shot to play some third base right out of the start of the season. That gives him a bit of upside and you can kick the tires on that and see what happens, right? Eventually he'll probably lose that job, but whatever. It's worth a look. I think Ryan Waldschmidt is someone that people like. He had a great season in the minors. He could be making the roster really, really quickly. And he's got tons of speed and he's got a bit of power. If he's going to win a job this spring or maybe in the summer, we could see Waldschmidt jump way, way up. Ha-Seong Kim might get some extra action with Tommy Edman missing the start of the season. If you need speed late in the draft, Ha-Seong Kim might be one of those guys that you can look at to give you a little something. I think if you're in a deep league, Jake Fraley, he's a platoon guy. He's got a career 776 OPS against righties. He could be a guy that you kind of plug and play a lot in those kinds of deep leagues where, you're looking for playing time. He can be that. I'm also looking at Troy Johnston. So I'm not going to sit here and talk about skills because what Troy Johnston is a lefty who should play in Coors, right? Left-handed plays in Coors. There's nothing really super special about that, but he'll be at home and get a lot of righties once in a while. So just keep that name in mind in those deep leagues to stream.
Are we talking like Michael Toglia, like how successful he was as a lefty in Coors, or is the contact skills a little bit better?
I mean, most people have better contact skills than that. But yes, his plate discipline is a lot better than Michael Toglia. He's not going to be a huge walk rate guy, but the batting average should be good. Right. It'll be like 260. It could be like 260, maybe even 270. But again, he'll be this like streamer at first base and outfield when, I think in some leagues he'll only be outfield. Like if you have 20 game eligibility, he'll only be outfield, but in Yahoo leagues, he'll be second base or outfield. He's not going to strike out a ton. He'll put the ball in play and it's Coors. That's what it is. It is a lefty in Coors, and the Rockies don't have a ton of options. It's not as though like, they have nowhere to play this guy. I think he might be the regular there. I think another guy who might sneak into this ranking because I'm just a glutton for punishment and I can't stop doing it. Edouard Julien, Also a lefty on this team who's infield eligible. He'll be eligible at second and first. I think he's way too passive, and he has big contact problems. But if there's something that can help you with contact problems, it's going somewhere where the ball moves less. Right. So, like, if you've got contact problems and he has contact problems, he's also just not nearly aggressive enough. If you've got that issue, one thing to do is just go somewhere where the ball moves less. You know what I mean? Like, just go there and see what happens, right? Maybe you'll finally stop taking strike 3 over and over and over again and stop taking strike 1 over and over and over again because he's one of the most passive players in all of baseball. You know, maybe he'll want to swing a little more because he knows he's in Colorado. Again, not someone you're trying to build a team around. Just a name to keep in mind. We've seen him be good before. Edouard Julien, he was a top 100 prospect. Great plate discipline. Again, it was mostly by spitting on breaking balls. And you don't have to spit on breaking balls in Coors because they don't move so much. So, yeah, him and Troy Johnston are two guys at the very end who I probably even, maybe in a very deep league, like an NFBC, I might be picking up Troy Johnston for the back end of my bench. Otherwise, both these guys, just a little little watch list to be like, hey, eventually they're going to go to Coors for a week and they're going to get a bunch of right-handed hitters. And I might want a piece of that pie.
So one of the names that you skipped over in this tier that I just thought had a super interesting spring training stat line is Houston outfielder Zach Cole. Cole battling for a starting outfield job in Houston. He has started his spring training with no hits in his first 12 plate appearances. He has 4 strikeouts in those 12 plate appearances. He's reached base 4 times, 3 walks, 1 hit by pitch, and has stolen second all 4 times he's been on. So I think that the speed there could play if he gets on base at this clip. A 333 OBP is great. A 0.00 batting average is not. So he's a guy who I'm at least curious to see how the contact plays at the major league level. And if he wins a starting job in Houston, he'll be a name that I'm at least putting on my scout list.
Yeah. To say you're a little worried about the contact in the majors is an understatement. Dude struck out 30% at every level. He struck out 30% of the time in the complex, right? Dude struck out all the time. How does he bring that to the majors? Like you said, a 333 OBP is great. A 333 OPS is not, right? Like that's a problem. Is there power here? Sure. Right. He's got a bit of game power, but it is going to be the glove that even the glove's not great. The speed might help him make this team. I know he's competing to be in the outfield. His main competition is Cam Smith, unless Cam Smith also goes and starts in center field instead of on the side. But yeah, the contact is a huge concern. Normally, I would say a guy who's striking out at this rate just won't make it in the majors. To strike out 30% of the time in 416 minor league plate appearances last year, mostly in Double-A, that's terrifying. That looks like 40+% in the major leagues. And I can't think of a single player who survived in the major leagues with a 40% strikeout rate for more than a few weeks. It's just horrible to watch when that's happening. So even if he walked 20% of the time, right, it just doesn't work. So that's what you'll be watching for this spring. Yeah. Can he keep a 30% strikeout rate can play, right? A 40% strikeout rate is not major league material.
From the very little I've seen of him, he reminds me of Will Benson from the Reds, kind of very similar makeup, speed, power, but you're not sure if he's going to make contact ever.
Yeah. And his zone contact rate in the minors is okay, which is kind of funny that his strikeout rate is so high. He doesn't chase that much either, to be honest, but the zone contact rate came way down in the major leagues in a small sample last year. It was just really bad. So it was only 52 plate appearances or so, but it was a 75% zone contact rate. You got to hit the strikes. If you swing at strikes, you got to hit them. You got to hit them about 4 out of every 5 times. You don't have to put them in play necessarily, but you got to get a piece of them. So that's the thing to be watching for. How often can he just get a piece of these and maybe live to fight another day. If he were to make the majors, he'd be a speed threat and maybe a little bit of power, but an absolute ratio tank, right? There's no way I see an OBP that stays above 300 with this, even if the strikeout rate's 30%, he's just not going to hit for enough average to try to have those kinds of numbers. So I know the minor league numbers look better than that, but remember, if your weakness is breaking balls, you can go a long way in the minor leagues. Like Edouard Julien, that's what we saw from him. He was able to strike out quite a bit in the minors, but spit on every breaking ball and make it to the majors. And then you can't do that anymore because too many guys can throw breaking balls for strikes, and then you become in big, big trouble. I worry that's what we're going to see with Zach Cole, but we have more spring training. The other thing to mention just about spring training, Zach Cole has those 4 stolen bases. One of the few stats that you really can take from spring training and take it into the season with some kind of correlation is stolen bases. So if a guy is running a ton in spring, there's some good data out there that'll tell you that they'll keep running. Like the team is willing to let them run. Stolen base, especially like team wide and players, we see that number go into the majors. Whereas like if you're hitting home runs in spring, yeah, sure, you're playing in a tiny ballpark against low rated, pitching. But if you're running, yeah, sure, maybe you're only being successful because of the batter you're against. But the more important thing is that you're getting the green light, right? And your manager's giving you the green light because they want to see you run. That can very well translate in the majors. So keep an eye on the stolen base leaderboards. And we'll probably talk about that again as we get a few more spring training games in the season, maybe next week. I'll try to talk more about that, but keep an eye on those spring training stolen bases.
Beautiful. Scott, we are out of time. Tell the people where to find you and your work.
Find me on Twitter at if the Chu fits, if the CHU fits. You can find me on Blue Sky, scottchu.pitcherlist.com. And of course, the top 300 hitters. You should see an update come out maybe by the end of this week. If not, first thing next week, we'll have some of the first updates rolling out, and that'll start happening weekly. I'm just waiting for a little bit more data to come through. Otherwise, the rankings look just like they did when I did them before.
Beautiful. And my name is Brett Ford. You can find me at Fade That Man on social media. I'm active in the Discords for Pitcher List as well. Make sure, if you haven't already, check out our lifetime subscriber. I believe is still open. And then, of course, with PL Pro and PL Plus, you get the live draft assistant, one of the best tools on the market right now. One of my favorite things to prep with, to draft with. Love that tool. I'm going to be using it for a second straight year this year. For Scott, I'm Brett. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see y'all next week. Later.